Go.
So you either got a problem or you see an opportunity and you need a solution. Should you go with doctrine, which is trusted, safe, secure, known, reliable, and wins 80% of the time? Or should you go with the 20% of the time when you need audacity on how to win? Staff is really good at providing a safety net for commanders. That's insurance and reliability. And where commanders excel on the audacity goes, that's like growth, decisive, game-changing. There's a difference between calculated risk and gambling. How do you reliably teach people to tap into their audacity, and how do you teach them when to set the doctrine aside, which is good 80% of the time, and when to use the audacity, and how good is your audacity? So knowing how good your doctrine and your audacity informs his decision on when to use it. If your doctrine was good, how does it get better, or how do you get better? The decision to step out of the doctrine and to investigate audacity begins with curiosity, and then it leads to creativity, forming a concept, developing a COA to exploit, committing to it, and then drawing a conclusion. And this little cycle of investigation is tied together by critical thinking and professional judgment, which is based out of doctrine and more, at least with the doctrine. Then when you get that conclusion, you've got to communicate. What are you going to do with it when you make your decision? Are you going to accept it and update and improve your doctrine so that we ratchet towards the future? Or are you going to reject the idea? Are you just going to file it for later use? Are you going to just hold it and grow a pile of data? Or are you going to explore and then develop an experiment to investigate further because it looks promising? Every transaction you run into is a decision to use either audacity or doctrine. But what do you do when your scouts are out, you have 5 things that come in, and you can think that 4 of them can be solved with doctrine, but one of them is going to require audacity. So if he's got a special one coming in, and you just use doctrine, and he's smart, he beats you. So how do you detect which one of those 5 needs the audacious solution because of either the protection against his genius or as a way to win the game completely and finally and decisively? You have a certain amount of time from the time the scouts detect it, so you have to make that decision on how to allocate it. How can you buy more time? How can you get better scouts? What's it cost to scout, and how reliable is that initial investigation and conclusion? You might then think of this challenge as one that is a blend of science, art, and management. And you might array that your skill levels, something like a failure level, black, red, amber, green, at some level of proficiency. What's the time and attention that you decide to allocate in your PME, your professional military education, towards the development of skill in each of those areas and the blend, and assuming that you even have reliable teaching methods that you can estimate what it takes to get to each subsequent level of expertise, knowing that this is not a linear scale, that moving from one to another is almost like a quantum level. It really, you have to fight your way through to that new level and then try to ratchet it in. And how vulnerable is that assessment, if it's reliable, to a world in which the world is moving away from your doctrine? So don't get left behind, and don't neglect your history, which is what got you to the doctrine that you have. How fast is it changing, and what's the gap between doctrine and the world? That's where the audacity helps bridge that gap, seizes moments, and protects against the enemy's moments. And if the skill level is something like this, novice, apprentice, journeyman, expert, master, artist, and sage, what's the cost of achieving that level of expertise in each of those areas? How do you achieve excellence? You need self-aware people with a reliable assessment with the tools to reliably improve, and then a decision on how much time and resource and effort to allocate to the development of expertise in all of it. Where do you spend your first dollar? If you're coming in blank slate, you don't know anything, what's the first thing you're going to build? Science or art or management? Well, decide, and then this is a path progression all the way up. What do you have to, how do you blend? When do you specialize? How do you integrate? How do you preserve the levels that you do have? How fast is the skill decay based on the rate of change in the world? So if you think of this now as this Mintzberg triangle, science, art, and management, trying to find some harmonious blend in the middle, where are you? How good are you? Where are you going? Why are you going there? What's it take to finish it? What can I do to help? Just remember, going up these skill levels, if I have fleet readiness at 80%, it takes a level of effort to get to the 90% fleet rate. That's relatively easy. Going from 90 to 100, though, is damn near impossible. Getting to 100%, because each subsequent problem is harder than all the previous ones. You solve the easiest ones first, and so you make progress initially, but now this thing starts looking asymptotic. And then there's a point of diminishing returns about how much it costs to get to the next level of proficiency, whether you choose to make the easier move and get a little bit better at each of those. So deciding how and where to allocate among those three different skill levels is a professional judgment for individuals, but then how do you blend that into a team of players? And how do you perform at the production level to solve today's problems while developing the team and giving them room to learn, sticking around long enough so that you can grow and learn fast enough, but not accepting risk on the short term. That's where the idea of doctrine versus audacity comes into play. That if all you ever do is doctrine and you never learn, yeah, you'll solve today's problems until the world starts changing. How much can you afford to invest into the audacity? If you're a leader in a unit and you're trying to develop audacious leaders for the future, but your self-assessment is, I'm not really good at that anyway, but I was good enough that I could get into a command position. Do I just teach guys to do it the way I did it? Or how do I find the really audacious guys and learn how to develop audacity in them when I may not be audacious myself? Does a coach or a teacher have to be better than the world-class talent they're grooming? No. Take a look at guys that are amazing coaches that were not great players themselves, but who are able to draw that out. How are we developing commanders who can look to see the audacity inside their subordinates and start grooming that? Maybe what we need is some special training for guys that just maximize their audacity because they have the measured, demonstrated skill, and then we just give them staff that are proficient and profound in doctrine as a safety net so that we can exploit the audaciousness of our really brilliant commanders, but protect it with the insurance policy of quality staff that keeps them from going off the deep end. As a profession, how do you organize between institutional training, self-development, and unit training to create the professional military education system that lets you achieve the best possible trade-off in the most number of people and get the allocation of assignment right so you're solving today's problems, seizing today's opportunities, but you're postured enough to learn through curiosity. It turns out that critical thinking is the essential quality that ties all of this together so that you can make these thousands of trade-off decisions every day, week, month, and year, and through a career. Critical thinking is the way that you navigate and tie together all of these challenges across multiple domains. So you can decide how much money to put into professional military education versus ongoing operations and maintenance of equipment versus trying to investigate to develop new equipment that takes you beyond the boundaries of today's doctrine to seize the decisive breakthrough. That's audacity in the force development, force management world, the acquisition world, so that you're ready for the generation after next fight. But you can't do so much of that that you neglect the immediate issues that are coming in. The problem is the uncertainty of what's coming up on your radar screen that must be addressed. Which one of those five is the one that requires audacity to survive? Not just win, but just to survive. You might need audacity just to survive, and your doctrine may not be good enough for that one. So you've got to make this 80-20 split in a sensible way. This is why your doctrine can never afford to be at 100% in your mind. Because if you think your doctrine's 100%, you are neglecting a changing world that is a demanding audacity. And the decision on which and when to use it is a critical thinking, professional judgment. That's the heads and tails of the same coin. That professional judgment is grounded in doctrine, but our doctrine is smart enough to say it's authoritative guidance, but you have to be able to know when to seize the moment and to be audacious and to know the difference between a calculated risk and a gamble, because lives are at stake and the nation. So, thanks for your attention.